The sun rose slowly over the sleepy countryside, bathing the meadows in a soft golden haze. A gentle breeze stirred the tall grass where a Labrador retriever chased the morning light. His coat shimmered like honey, and his eyes held the quiet warmth of trust. His name was Bailey. He lived with Thomas, a retired train conductor who loved his morning tea as much as he loved the steady rhythm of trains in the distance. Every morning they followed the same path. Thomas walked with his cane, Bailey at his side, tails of dew flicking from the grass as they went. Thomas would hum old railway tunes, and Bailey listened as if he understood every note. When they reached the old station bench, Thomas always paused. He would sit, sigh contentedly, and whisper, "You and me again, lad. Another good morning." Bailey would rest his head on Thomas's knee, watching the horizon with him. Years earlier, Thomas had found Bailey abandoned near those same tracks. No collar, no name. The pup had been trembling from cold and fear. Thomas wrapped him in his coat, whispering, "No more waiting for you, boy. You've found your home." Since then, Bailey had never left his side. They became part of the town's routine, the old man and the golden dog. When Thomas visited the market, Bailey carried a small bag in his mouth. When Thomas stopped at the cafe, Bailey lay patiently beneath the table, tail wagging when someone smiled at them. Children loved him. Strangers patted him. Everyone knew the bond they shared. Time drifted gently. As seasons changed and gray touched Thomas's hair, Bailey grew older too. His muzzle softened with silver, but his loyalty never dimmed. Their walks grew slower, yet their rhythm stayed the same. Every morning, the path to the bench, the hum of trains, the soft companionship of silence. One autumn morning, the air was crisp and damp. Thomas coughed more than usual, but still put on his cap and coat. Bailey nudged the walking stick toward him. "I know, lad," Thomas chuckled weakly. "We've got to keep our promise." Together they set out, the fog hugging their steps. At the bench, Thomas looked out at the rails. "Funny, isn't it? All my life watching others leave. Now it's just us staying." Bailey pressed closer. The whistle of a distant train echoed through the valley. For a long while, they simply sat, the world moving quietly around them. That evening, Thomas was tired. He fell asleep in his chair, the television humming softly. Bailey lay nearby, eyes never leaving him. The house felt calm, wrapped in the hum of evening. When the clock struck 10, Bailey barked once. A small sound, as if to remind Thomas it was bedtime. But Thomas didn't stir. The next morning, neighbors noticed the curtains still drawn. The doctor arrived. Bailey barked anxiously as strangers entered. They spoke in low voices. Then one said quietly, "He's gone peacefully." Bailey didn't understand. He nudged Thomas's hand, licked his fingers, whimpered softly. When they carried Thomas away, Bailey tried to follow, straining against the leash until it snapped. He chased the car, paws pounding the cold road, but the car disappeared beyond the bend. That night Bailey returned to the doorstep, sat by the door and waited. The clock ticked through the silence. The wind brushed through the open field. He waited until the moon climbed high, then until it faded again into dawn. Days passed. The neighbor, Mrs. Grant, came with food and water. Bailey ate little, only enough to survive. Every morning, just as the church bell struck 8, he would leave the yard, cross the narrow bridge, and walk the same path he once walked with Thomas. Past the hedgerows, across the tracks, to the station bench. He sat there, head high, eyes fixed on the arriving trains. Passengers stepped off, looked at him curiously. Some smiled, others took photos. A child once dropped a biscuit beside him. Bailey didn't touch it. He kept watching the platform, as if searching each face for the one he loved. When the platform emptied, he would lower his head and rest until the next train came. Then he'd lift his ears again, hopeful. The station master tried to move him, offering scraps of food. Bailey stayed. Even in the biting wind, even under pouring rain, he never missed a day. News spread through the small town. The people began calling him the waiting dog. Some left food, Others brought blankets. A local newspaper printed his picture. A loyal heart still waiting, the headline read. But Bailey didn't care for fame. He had one purpose, to keep his vigil until Thomas returned. Winter arrived, harsh and long. Snow dusted the platform white. Bailey's fur grew thin from the cold, yet he kept coming. His body trembled, but his eyes stayed gentle and certain. One morning, a young schoolboy named Oliver found him lying under the bench, covered in frost. Oliver took off his scarf, wrapping it around Bailey's neck. "Don't worry, old boy," he whispered. "He'll come back soon." From that day, Oliver stopped by every morning before school. He'd bring warm biscuits, sometimes leftover meat from dinner. Bailey began to recognize his footsteps. His tail would twitch faintly as the boy approached. Oliver would sit beside him, telling stories about school, friends, dreams of becoming a train driver. Bailey listened quietly, eyes half closed, as if the boy's voice carried a warmth that reminded him of Thomas. The station staff built a small shelter beside the bench so Bailey could rest from the cold. They covered it with a tarp and an old cushion. Still, Bailey preferred the bench. He always wanted to see the platform clearly, always waiting for the man in the brown coat and cap who would call his name again. As the months passed, spring returned. The frost melted, the air softened. Flowers grew near the rails, their scent mingling with the smell of metal and steam. Bailey's steps had become slow and stiff. Sometimes he stumbled, sometimes he simply lay in the sunlight, eyes open toward the tracks. One bright morning, Oliver arrived with a sandwich in his pocket. "Morning, Bailey," he said cheerfully. But Bailey didn't lift his head. His breathing was shallow, each rise and fall smaller than the last. The boy sat down, resting a hand on the old dog's back. A train whistled far away. Bailey's ears twitched. His tail moved just once. The sound grew louder, a deep, familiar echo rolling through the air. Bailey opened his eyes, gaze fixed beyond the platform. For a moment, his expression changed. Not pain, but recognition. As if he finally saw what he'd been waiting for all along. He drew a slow breath, then let it go. The wind carried a soft sigh. His body relaxed completely. Oliver called his name once, twice. There was no movement. The whistle faded. The sun broke through the clouds. Bailey lay peacefully beneath the old station bench as the morning sun grew stronger, the warmth falling gently across his fur. Oliver sat beside him, quiet and still. For a long time, he didn't understand that the dog had slipped away. He only felt a strange emptiness, a quiet unlike any other morning. The trains continued to come and go, but the platform felt different, as if time itself had stopped to bow its head. The station master approached, hat in hand. He knelt beside the boy, touching Bailey's paw softly. "He's gone, lad," he said quietly. He waited as long as he could. Oliver's eyes stung. He nodded slowly, whispering. He was waiting for his owner. He never gave up. The man placed his hand on Oliver's shoulder, and for a few minutes, no one spoke. Even the pigeons seemed to keep their distance, circling silently above the rails. Word spread quickly through the town. By midday, a small crowd had gathered at the bench. Mrs. Grant stood among them, holding a small bouquet of flowers. "He was more faithful than most people ever are," she murmured. A few of the railway workers laid their caps on the bench beside him. Someone draped a small blanket over Bailey's body, the same one they'd once left for him during winter. That evening, when the last train had passed and the station was quiet, a group of townsfolk returned. They dug a small resting place under the oak tree near the platform, overlooking the tracks. It was the spot where Bailey always watched the trains. The sunset turned the sky gold and pink as they lowered him into the ground. Oliver placed his scarf, the one Bailey had worn through the coldest nights, gently over the mound. "Sleep well, Bailey," the boy whispered. "He's waiting for you too now." Days went by, and the station felt emptier than ever. Each morning, Oliver still passed through, glancing at the bench. For the first time in months, it was unoccupied. But then he noticed something new. Flowers, letters, and small tokens left by strangers. Someone had placed a framed photo of Bailey sitting by the tracks. Beneath it, a note read, "Some wait forever, and that's love." The story reached beyond the town. A local newspaper ran an article titled "The Dog Who Never Stopped Waiting." Soon after, people from nearby villages began visiting. Some brought their children, some came alone. They stood quietly by the bench, some smiling, some with tears in their eyes. A few left collars, dog biscuits, or handwritten notes. The railway staff decided to honor Bailey permanently. With donations from townspeople, they commissioned a bronze statue, a life-sized Labrador sitting patiently, gazing toward the horizon. When it was unveiled, the entire town gathered. The mayor spoke softly, "In loyalty, there is love, and in love, there is eternity." Oliver, standing near the front, smiled through his tears. He placed a single yellow rose at the statue's paws. Over time, the bench became a place of comfort for many. People came not only to remember Bailey but to find peace in his story. Travelers stopped to rest there between trains, parents told their children about the faithful dog, and even lonely souls found solace watching the sunset from his spot. The station master often said, "He turned this platform into something sacred." Oliver grew older, but he never forgot Bailey. Even as a young man, he would still visit the station after work, sitting on the same bench. Sometimes he'd close his eyes and imagine the soft thump of a tail beside him, or the gentle panting sound of a happy dog. He'd smile, knowing that somehow, Bailey was still there. Not in body, but in spirit. Years later, when Oliver became a train engineer, he'd sometimes see the statue from his cabin window as he pulled into the station. Every time he passed, he gave a small nod, a quiet salute to the friend who'd taught him what loyalty truly meant. "Still watching the trains, old boy?" he'd whisper under his breath. Just like before, life moved forward as it always does. The town grew busier, new buildings rose, new faces arrived. But the bronze Labrador never changed. Rain, snow, and sunshine all touched him, yet he remained steadfast, eyes always turned toward the tracks. People still stopped to pat his head, as though expecting the statue to wag its tail. One summer evening, many years later, a little girl wandered to the bench with her parents. She pointed at the statue. "Who's that, Daddy?" Her father smiled. "That's Bailey," he said softly. "He waited for his owner every day right here. He never gave up." The girl tilted her head thoughtfully. "Did his owner ever come back?" Her father hesitated, then said, "Maybe not here, but I think they found each other somewhere else." As the sun dipped below the horizon, the bronze shimmered in gold light. A train thundered past, its whistle echoing through the valley. For a brief moment it sounded almost like a call, a familiar whistle Thomas used to blow when he arrived at the platform. Some swore they could feel a breeze circle the bench then, a soft warm gust that rustled the flowers around Bailey's statue. The station master, now gray and frail himself, noticed it too. He leaned against his cane and smiled. "He's still waiting," he said quietly. "And maybe now he's not waiting alone." At night, when the last train left and the station fell silent, the moonlight spilled across the tracks. Shadows danced gently over the bronze figure. Somewhere in the stillness, a faint sound could sometimes be heard, the soft thump of a tail against wood, or the low sigh of a dog settling beside his friend. No one could explain it, but those who heard it never doubted what it meant. For love that pure never truly ends. It simply waits, patiently, faithfully, across time. Years passed like quiet ripples over the same river. The old railway station changed, but the heart of it remained the same. The bronze Labrador, sitting faithfully by the bench, had become part of the town's soul. Travelers greeted him as if he were alive, brushing their hands over his head before boarding their trains. Even the children who had once played by his paws grew older, telling their own children's stories about the dog who never stopped waiting. Oliver, now middle-aged, still drove trains. Every day, when his route passed through the station, he slowed slightly, eyes drawn to the statue in the sunlight. Sometimes he thought he saw a flicker, not from the bronze, but something softer, a shimmer of gold fur in the light. He'd smile quietly, whispering, "Still here, mate, still watching over us." One cold autumn morning, Oliver was walking through the station before his shift when he noticed a small boy sitting by the statue. The boy's cheeks were wet, his backpack beside him. Oliver approached gently. "You all right, son?" he asked. The boy nodded, but his lip trembled. "My dog ran away," he said quietly. "Mum says he's not coming back." Oliver looked at the statue, then back at the boy. "This dog waited too," he said softly. "He waited every day for his friend, even when people said he shouldn't. But maybe that's what love really means, to keep hope, even when others don't understand." The boy looked at the statue again, wiping his tears. "Did he find his owner?" Oliver smiled. "I think he did. Dogs don't really say goodbye. They just wait somewhere we can't see yet." The boy nodded slowly. When his mother called, he stood and whispered, "Bye, Bailey." Oliver watched him leave, then turned to the bronze Labrador, patting its head. "Still teaching, aren't you?" he murmured. As the years continued, Bailey's story spread beyond the town. Someone filmed a small documentary, capturing old photographs and interviews from people who had known Thomas and Bailey. The video went online and millions watched. People across the world wrote messages, stories about their own pets, about loss, love, and loyalty. Bailey's tale became more than just memory. It became a symbol. Animal shelters began naming their rescue programs after him. Posters showed his statue with the words, "Because every dog deserves someone who never gives up." Donations increased. Stray dogs found homes. Elderly people adopted companions who reminded them of their own faithful friends. The story of one Labrador began healing hearts far beyond the place he'd once waited. One evening, Oliver received a letter from a small school in Scotland. The children had painted pictures of Bailey and sent them with a note. "We learned about Bailey and Thomas in class. Now we know that animals feel love too." Oliver held the paper for a long time, smiling through the tears that gathered in his eyes. By the time Oliver grew old, the station had changed again. The benches were new, the lights brighter, the trains faster. Yet the statue remained untouched. People still brought flowers, collars, or pictures of their pets. It had become more than a memorial. It was a promise that love once given never truly fades. One late afternoon, Oliver sat on the bench beside the statue. The air was cool, the smell of rain drifting through the wind. He leaned his walking stick against his knee and sighed softly. "It's been a long road, old friend," he said. "But you never left, did you?" The platform was quiet. Only the distant hum of an approaching train echoed in the valley. Oliver closed his eyes for a moment, feeling the warmth of the setting sun on his face. The light glowed golden, the same shade as Bailey's fur once was. In that stillness, he felt something brush against his leg, gentle and familiar. He opened his eyes, but no one was there. Only the faint shimmer of dust swirling in the fading sunlight. He smiled faintly. "Time to go home, lad," he whispered. That evening, the station master found Oliver still sitting on the bench, a calm expression on his face, his hand resting on the statue's paw. The next day, the news spread quietly. The man who had once befriended the waiting dog had joined him at last. They buried Oliver beside Bailey, beneath the oak tree by the tracks. A new plaque was added, engraved with simple words, "Together again, the man who stopped, and the dog who never left." The townspeople came to pay their respects. Some brought flowers, some stood silently, watching the trains pass. When the whistle blew, it seemed softer that day, almost tender, as if the sound carried the spirit of two souls walking side by side, reunited beyond time. Years later, children still visited the site. Tourists took pictures. Lovers held hands nearby. But those who paused long enough to listen sometimes swore they could hear it. The faint bark of a Labrador, the distant laugh of an old man, and the soft rhythm of two loyal hearts still keeping time with every passing train. And so, even as generations changed, the story of Bailey and Thomas lived on. Not just in bronze or words, but in the hearts of everyone who ever loved and lost, everyone who ever waited and believed. Because loyalty never dies. It simply waits, patiently, faithfully, until love comes home again.